Alright, so this is the first tethered test of the balloon. And the main goal of this is just to make sure that the camera mount is stable so that it doesn't end up shaking all around during flight, so that's our camera. As well as making sure that our data recorder works with our altimeter, which is on the outside here. And we would have put the GPS in, but we're using a much smaller balloon than normal to save helium and money. So it doesn't actually have enough lift for the GPS, but it's fine because we've already tested the GPS independently. So yeah, we're just gonna let it go and fly it around this field for a bit. Our first tethered test flight of the balloon performed entirely nominally. We got it off the ground and we got all the equipment working without a problem. The altimeter, the thermometer, the camera, and the data recorder all performed nominally, which was great. And so here's a few minutes of footage. Displayed on your screen right now is a graph for the altitude and temperature for the entirety of the flight, which was about 25 minutes. And as you can see for the altitude, which is in blue, we reached a maximum altitude of approximately 70 meters above ground level, which in turn is about 75 meters above sea level. And for temperature, which is in red, it remained mostly constant because in proportion to the entirety of the atmosphere, we actually moved very little. And so while this flight went great for the most part, there were definitely some things that we wanted to improve upon having done this flight. And so the first is that our camera right now is rather poor in quality and has a low field of view, as well as suffers from glare through the windows. I'll show that in a bit. And so we realized that we should replace this with a much better camera, albeit it is a little bit bulkier, but it will take better videos and have a higher field of view. So there's that. The second issue is that the crate is much too heavy, and we realized we could save a ton of weight simply by getting rid of the crate and using a harness from rope to connect the payload to the balloon. In addition, the data logger needs a button because, as it's currently set up, the data logger can only stop recording and save the file by setting a timer in the software. But if we have a button, we can interact with it directly and tell it when to open and when to close and save the file. Because if you unplug the data logger before the time runs out, then you lose all of your saved data. So that's a big issue. And finally, we need a much bigger balloon. The 100-gram balloon that we used for this test was barely able to lift the payload, even with the GPS and the lid removed. So we're probably going to upgrade to a 200-gram balloon for the next flight.